Hello. We've already had one video in this series that showed simple animation. And in that video, we talked a lot about position. So there are CSS properties to set what kind of position we're using, as well as the coordinates, top or bottom, and left or right. We're not going to go over them again in this video, but we're going to use them. So we're going to start with a page that looks like this, and we're going to transform that brown box into a sliding panel. I'm clicking it, so click once to go down, click again to go up. And this page scrolls, so the panel stays in position no matter where you are on the page, and if it's down, it also stays in position. So this is actually not too complicated, but what you're going to learn that is interesting or unusual is you're going to learn how to get the exact height of that panel so that no matter how much information is in it, this jQuery code that we'll write will work perfectly whether this is a smaller panel or a larger panel. So we're going to start with a page where nothing's been done at all yet. And we've just got one line of regular text, and we have a paragraph that's inside a div, and we're going to convert that brown paragraph into our sliding panel. So let's look at the code we have to begin with. The index.html is pretty simple. I've got all the text inside a wrapper div that has a set width on it, and this is the div that will become the sliding panel. And it's just a div with two paragraphs in it, and it has an ID on it. The ID is chocolate because it's brown. The CSS for it is not special. There are fonts, there is padding and margin, and the panel itself right now has its font size, line height, padding, margin, background color, and text color. But it doesn't have any positioning elements. We're going to put those entirely in the jQuery file, our main.js. So right now that is empty. We have our document ready handler or function, and we're going to write all our jQuery in here. I'm going to paste the styles we're going to use. So we're using the jQuery CSS method, and within that I've got curly braces to hold more than one property because I'm setting several things. So I'm using position fixed, which means it won't scroll with the rest of the contents of the body. I am giving it a set width of 500 pixels. I am specifying the height as auto. Now, normally you wouldn't need to do this, but it works really well when we use the position coordinate bottom, which we are going to use. So bottom 0 is going to make the bottom of the panel line up with the bottom edge of the browser window. And as I said, the optional height specification here of auto, it just makes that work better in some browsers. And finally, we are going to position the right side of the panel 2 rems away from the right side of the browser window, the right hand edge of the browser. So when I save this and I reload the page, the panel is now in place at the bottom of the page. So that wasn't too hard. The tricky part here is figuring out the amount of the panel to hide when it slides down, when it slides out of sight. So right now it's in the up position and it's perfect. It's just where you want it to be. Now, if I resize the browser, which I'll do by opening my JavaScript console, this panel will stay put. So if I make it more narrow, right, it's always the exact same distance from the right edge of the browser because I used the right coordinate, and the bottom is always stuck on the bottom of the window. So no matter how tall or short the window is, this panel will be aligned along the bottom edge. And if I had a bunch of text in there that would scroll, I will paste some in here just for the time being, and I'll take it out again. Let's see, reload, right? It stays put. That is position fixed, right? It doesn't move. But if I click on this panel now, it does not slide up and down. We haven't done that yet. So the first step is we have to figure out what is the height of the panel so that we can move it down out of sight. And that is easy enough to do. So we go into the JavaScript, and after we've set up the panel, right? It has to be after the panel is the height and the width it's going to be. Then we can find out, well, what is the height? What is the actual height of that element on the page? So jQuery has a method, outerHeight, and this will get the height including the margin and the padding, which is really important. So we're going to do that, and let's console log that so that when we reload this, you're going to see the words panel height, and you're going to see that number in the JavaScript console. Put that like that, and we'll save, and we will reload. Let's make the console a little bit wider here. So you see that now we've logged the panel height. So this number is in pixels, but we don't need to use px when we use it in our code. So the challenge we're facing is that if we move the panel down by exactly the full height of the panel, it'll be completely out of sight. So in many cases, we want the top part of the panel to peep up so that that top part can be clicked. So we're going to go ahead and write the jQuery that makes the panel slide up and down. And for the time being, we'll create an arbitrary value for the amount of the panel that's going to stick up, the amount of the panel that will remain visible, so the top edge. And we're just going to pick a number that's reasonable. I'm going to say 50 pixels. So this is how we'll do that. And now we'll hide the panel by changing the value of the bottom coordinate, okay, which we had set at 0 before, and we're now going to just put the panel down, not animate it yet, but we're just going to put it into its starting position using that variable we just made called hide amount. So let me zoom to normal size here, reload. So you see this isn't perfect because we can't really see that first line of text. We're going to deal with that at the end after we make it slide up and down, because that's a little bit tedious to get that exact measurement, but we will do that after we get the sliding up and down perfected, which is not too hard to do. Okay, now let's make sure that you understand what we've done so far, okay? So we got the actual total height of the brown panel, okay, which has the ID chocolate, right? So we got its total height, and we logged it to the console so that we could see it, because we're going to see some other numbers later. And then we picked an arbitrary number, 50, meaning 50 pixels, and we subtracted that from the panel height to get the amount that we're going to hide. So we're not hiding the full panel height, we're hiding a little bit less so that some edge sticks up, okay? And the way we did that was once we got this hide amount, which is less than the full panel height, then we repositioned the panel here on line 19. And the way we did it was with the CSS property bottom, which is a coordinate, and we did negative, that's a minus sign right there, negative hide amount. And that slid that amount of the panel down below the bottom edge of the browser window. So now let's also log that hide amount, so you know what it is, all right? So we're going to say the hidden height, meaning the amount that's hidden. So we'll log that text, and then we'll put that number. We won't put the negative version of it, we'll just put the positive number hide amount, okay? Which we got right here in line 16. So we'll save and we'll reload, and now we have that new information. So you see that the hidden height of the panel, the amount to hide, is less than the full height of the panel, all right? And you saw that annoying flash when I reload. This is because we have the panel visible when the page loads, because we don't have any text on the page except for the one line. So we actually see it move when it's repositioned by the jQuery. And there's some ways to deal with that, which we won't get into right now. The next thing we want to do is actually code in the sliding motion, all right? So I'm going to paste a typical event listener, jQuery event listener. So it's it's on, click. What are we clicking on? We're clicking on the thing that has the ID chocolate, which is our brown rectangular panel, okay? So when we click that, it's either gonna go up or it's gonna go down, right? So that's what we're gonna fill in here in the middle of the event listener. So we simply need to animate the bottom edge back to 0 where the panel is fully visible. That's what we're going to do to make it slide up to where we can see the entire brown panel. And we'll put this code, this animate code, inside the event listener. So this will be the slide up part. Okay, so we can use chocolate, and we will use the animate method. All right, so we start with parentheses and a semicolon, but then inside, to make things work, we have a pair of curly braces. So that's what animate requires. We're just going to do one thing. We're going to change the bottom position to 0. And we don't need anything after this because it's the only thing inside the animate curly braces. But we do have one more thing to add, and we're going to add a speed. So we can say slow and fast in quotation marks, or we can use a number. And I'm going to use 300 because it looks pretty good. So if I save and reload, all right, and then I click, and it goes up. So far it doesn't go down, but it does go up. Now you might wonder about that 300. What if I made it 600? 600 is more time, so it will be a lot slower. So now if I make it go up, that's probably too slow. Okay, so 300 is pretty good. I'll save and reload one last time. And there we go. So that is 300, a speed of 300. Okay, so our panel is up. How do we make it go down? We want to do that with the same event. We want to listen to a click on the brown panel and anywhere on the panel, and then it'll go down or it'll go up, right? But our event listener doesn't know if the panel's up or down. If it's up, we want to click to make it move down. And if it's down, we want to click to make it move up. Now you heard me say if, so let's first sketch in a conditional. So we're going to write, if something, right, else something. All right, and so if it's up, we want it to move down, and else we want it to move up. I'm going to introduce you to a cool way to get this job done. You've seen addClass and removeClass in a previous video called Changing CSS Styles, number 5 in the series. Well, jQuery also gives us a method, hasClass, and this lets us find out if an element has a particular class on it. So I'm going to test for this condition in my if statement. Does the chocolate div have the class up? So I'll be doing that right in here, right? This is where we test a condition. So if the chocolate div, the thing with the ID chocolate, if it has a class that is named up, okay? Now we haven't seen this class before, and this class does not exist in our CSS. There is no such class in here, and that's fine. We don't have to put the class in the CSS at all. We can just make it up in the jQuery and it'll work. Since there is no class named up until right now, we're going to need to give the div this class somehow. Now naturally that should be done when the div is put into the up position. So we're going to take our if, cut it, paste it where it belongs into our event listener, right? Then we're going to take the code that makes the panel slide up, the code we just wrote, cut it, put it in here where it belongs, right? Oh, that's not where it belongs. That is if it already has the class up. Nope. So take that out. This is what moves it up. When it goes to bottom 0, it's up. So at that point, we want to, right here, we want to add class up and put our semicolon back where it belongs. So we chained add class up, this new fancy class that we just invented. We chained it on top of animate. So the animate code that makes the panel slide up, which we just saw works great, we add the class up there. Now, how do we make it move down? Well, we already did that when we positioned it, right? This is where we positioned the panel to be in the down position. So I'm going to copy. I'm going to go down into the down part here, right? But it's not quite that. We need to animate it. So let's save that, right? Grab this code, copy it, put that in here. Okay, animate, but not bottom 0, right? Bottom height amount. So X that, put that there. Do we need this anymore? Nope, that was just to get us in the right position. And we're not adding the class anymore. We're removing the class. So this is like some other things we've seen in previous videos where you just want sort of a hide show on, off, up, down. In this case, it's up, down. So you have a simple if and one else. There's no else if. You don't need it. You're only doing two things. And in this case, we say, if the div has the class up, move it down by putting the bottom to that negative amount below the edge of the browser window. And when you do that, remove the class up, which it must have had because it executed this part of the conditional, right? If it doesn't have the class up, then this is going to run. What happens if it does not have the class up? It is going to go to bottom 0, meaning it's going to be fully visible. It's going to be up. And then, since it's up, we add the class up. So this is a piece of jQuery that is so reusable. Like you could reuse this not only on sliding panels, but on all kinds of animated things that you essentially want to toggle, but there's no toggle code for it. So this is handcrafted toggle, right? Throw on one little class and it will work perfectly. So this is now the complete event listener for a click on the box. And we will save. And we will reload. And now, when it's down, it goes up. When it's up, it goes down. Click, click, click. Anywhere on the panel, it doesn't matter. click, click, click. If you wanted to add a little X in the top corner, like people do, you could, but you don't have to. So we've got a perfectly workable, you click anywhere else, nothing happens. Clicking, nothing happens, right? Perfectly well-functioning sliding panel. Now, the only problem we still have is that arbitrary number 50 that we picked. We really need to get the right number now so that we can see the text at the top that says, click me to see animation. We want to see that when the panel is in the down position. We want that peeping up above the bottom edge of the browser. So we could fool around with numbers and come up with a number that worked, that made that text visible. But remember that fonts and so on might be different on different devices. So to do this right, we really should use jQuery to find the exact amount of height that we need to use for this page, this panel, this font, this spacing, and so forth. Luckily, jQuery can tell us that. We need to measure the space from the top of the panel to the top of the second paragraph that's inside the panel. That is the amount that we want to show above the edge when the panel is down. So we want to find the position of the top edge of the panel, find the position of the top edge of the second paragraph, subtract to get the height of that first line of text, including all its margin and padding above and below it, and subtract again the full height of the panel minus the height of just that first line, so that we know exactly how much to hide down below the bottom edge of the browser window. So I'm going to paste in 4 chunks of code that do exactly that. And the place where I'm going to put them is before I need to use that hide amount, okay? So up here, okay, so when we got the panel height, but before we use the arbitrary number. So in between here, I am about to paste. Okay, so I have pasted 4 clumps of code. 1, 2, 3, 4. And they do exactly what that list said a moment ago. And in addition to doing those things, we will console log each of the things that we got, so that it's very clear what our variable names stand for, right? So I'm going to run this in a second and you'll see each of these things in the console. But panel height we had before. We got that, we logged the panel height, okay? Now, panel offset top. Offset is a jQuery property, and it gets the current position of the thing that you want, in this case, the chocolate panel, and dot top gets the top property. So offset actually gives you 2 things. It gives you the top and the left. So if you only want to get the top, you have to do it this way, okay? So then we're going to have what is that position within the page. Then we're going to get another position. And let me move this over here so you can see it all. There we are. Oop. Okay. Then we're going to get the top of the second paragraph because it's the first paragraph we want to show. So we're going to get the difference between what's the very top of the panel and what's the very top of the second paragraph. And that will give us the amount of height that we want to show above the edge. Cool. All right. So we're going to log that as the top of the second paragraph position, right? Then we are going to do some subtraction. And so we're going to take that second paragraph number, right, which is a larger number because it's farther down. The top of the page is 0. So the lower you get, the bigger the number, right? So we're going to take the bigger number and subtract from it the smaller number, which is the position of the top of the brown panel. We're going to stick that in a variable named showAmount, and we have to do parseInt because there's going to be all these decimal places, and we're going to round it. We're going to just like get it with no decimal places, turn it into an integer. So parseInt is not jQuery, it's just JavaScript. And we'll show that in the console too, right? The height of that first paragraph. And now we're going to get our real height amount. So previously we had this height amount, this fake height amount of panel height minus 50, okay? We're going to get rid of this line that we've had. Whoops, here, make sure you can see it. We're going to get rid of this line that we've had since the very beginning because it was a fake. The 50 was a fake. Now we're going to have the real height amount, the real height of the panel that we wish to be hidden. So get rid of that. And so height amount is going to be the real panel height, which we've had since the beginning. The panel height, right? So total panel height, total height of the brown box. And from that, we are going to subtract the show amount. And by subtracting the show amount, we'll get a real height amount, and that'll be the amount that will hide below the bottom edge of the browser window. So this should all work if we save and we run it right now. Notice what happened to the brown panel. We can now see this text, right? And it's visible when the panel is down, and we don't see any of the second paragraph, so we got that exact amount. And then in the console, we have logged all our new things, right? The top of the panel, its position, the top of the second P, its position. The difference between them happens to be 80. Remember when we had 50, it wasn't enough. Well, it turns out that it's 80. So the amount of the panel that has to be hidden is this number. And the hidden height of the panel, same number. So that may seem like a lot of math, but it's just addition and subtraction. Actually, it's all subtraction. So it's not that burdensome. And the great thing about this is that now we've got code that will work even if our panel has different dimensions or if it has more text in it, which would make it taller. So let's have a look at how that would work. I'm going to go into my index.html, and inside the chocolate paragraph, the chocolate div, I'm going to paste a whole nother paragraph. And so I save, and before I reload, think this is going to make the panel taller. So it means when the hidden part is hidden, it has to hide a lot more. The top of that panel has to come down a lot farther. But because of the way that we wrote our code, it is going to work fine without changing any of that code. So now we have a much taller panel. Oops, let's put that down. All right, much taller. And yet the sliding works perfectly. We can also change this. Let's go back into our index.html. I'm sorry, not that. Let's go back into our JavaScript and let's make the panel wider. It was 500 pixels. Let's make it 700 pixels. Does our code still work? Sure enough, code still works. So you may have thought that those 4 lines, those 4 chunks of code that we put in were overkill. You might have thought, why are we doing all this stuff? Oh my goodness, we don't need that. Let's just fiddle around and find the right number. But this little bit of work illustrates to you some of the power of jQuery, so that if you take time to build something in a flexible way the first time you build it, it's going to be really easy to reuse it in your future projects.